I've been a trucker for over a decade now, and in that time, I've seen my fair share of strange things. Long nights on the road do that to you. You start noticing things you shouldn't. But nothing I'd experienced before could compare to what happened to me last year. I still don't know exactly what I saw that night. And honestly, I don't want to know. It was late February, and I was driving through a particularly desolate stretch of Wyoming. No towns, no gas stations, just miles of empty highway and rolling hills swallowed in darkness. I had been on the road for nearly 8 hours straight, and exhaustion was starting to creep in. I kept telling myself I'd pull over at the next rest stop, but there hadn't been one for nearly an hour. Then I saw it. A gas station. A small, run-down station in the middle of nowhere. There were no cars parked outside. No lights except for the flickering neon open sign. Something about it felt off, but I needed to stretch my legs, maybe grab a coffee. So I pulled in. The place was eerily quiet. The old metal door groaned as I pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit interior. The aisles were nearly empty, stocked with dusty bags of chips and off-brand soda. Behind the counter stood a cashier. An old man, maybe in his 70s, with deep wrinkles and milky white eyes that never seemed to blink. He didn't greet me, didn't even look at me, just stood there, staring at the countertop. I grabbed a bottle of water and made my way over, trying to shake the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. When I set the bottle down, he finally looked up, and then, in a voice that sounded way too smooth for his age, he said, "You should leave." I let out a nervous chuckle. "That bad, huh?" He didn't smile, didn't blink. His pale eyes locked onto mine. "You need to leave. Right now." The way he said it, calm, firm, like he was warning me, sent a cold wave of fear through my chest. I forced a laugh, grabbed my water, and backed toward the door. "All right, man. I'll get out of your hair." The old man didn't respond, but as I pushed the door open, I heard him say one last thing. "Don't stop for anyone." I got back in my truck, my skin crawling with unease. I told myself the guy was just crazy, that he had probably seen too many horror movies and liked messing with drivers like me. But as I pulled back onto the highway, something in my gut told me he was serious. About 30 minutes later, I saw something ahead on the road. A car pulled off onto the shoulder. Its hazards were flashing. A woman stood beside it, waving her arms frantically. Her face was pale, her hair wild and tangled. She looked desperate. I remembered what the old man said. Don't stop for anyone. But I'm not a heartless guy. If someone's in trouble, I help. That's just how I was raised. I slowed my truck as I approached, rolling down the window just enough to call out, "Hey, you okay?" The woman ran toward the cab, eyes wide with terror. "You have to help me," she gasped. "Please, he's coming." Something about the way she said it sent chills through me. "Who's coming?" I asked. She grabbed onto the door handle. "Please, let me in. He's coming right now. He's almost here." I turned my head, scanning the empty road behind us. Nothing, just darkness stretching for miles. But when I turned back toward her, she was gone. The door was still locked. The road was empty. It was like she had never been there at all. My foot slammed on the gas. I didn't care what was happening. I just wanted to get the hell away. I drove fast, too fast. But after about 5 minutes, something changed. The air inside the truck got heavy, like I was driving through a pressure chamber. Then, my headlights flickered. My radio cut to static. And over the sound of the white noise, I heard something else. A voice. "You should have stopped." I nearly ran off the road. The voice wasn't coming from my radio. It was coming from inside the cab. I turned my head, and my blood went cold. The woman was in my passenger seat. Her head was tilted at an unnatural angle, her mouth half open, her eyes black as coal. And she was grinning. I slammed on the brakes. But the second the truck stopped, she was gone. I sat there, gripping the wheel, trying to steady my breathing. Then, in my side mirror, I saw something else. Far down the highway, in the exact same spot I had seen the woman before, was a car, hazards flashing, and beside it, a woman waving her arms frantically. The same woman. I threw the truck into gear and got the hell out of there. I drove for hours, refusing to stop, even when exhaustion started creeping in. By the time I finally pulled into a truck stop, the sun was beginning to rise. I sat there for a long time, staring at my hands, trying to convince myself that I had imagined everything, that I was just overtired, that I had been hallucinating. But then, as I stepped out of the cab, I noticed something in the passenger seat. A single red envelope, with a note inside. 4 words, written in shaky handwriting. You should have stopped. I slammed the passenger door shut. My entire body was shaking, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The red envelope sat on the seat like it had been there the whole time, but I knew it hadn't, because the passenger seat had been empty when I pulled into the truck stop. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. I just locked the doors, climbed into the sleeper, and sat in the darkness, gripping the edge of the mattress, trying to tell myself I was imagining things. But I wasn't. I knew what I saw, and whatever I had picked up on that road, it hadn't left me. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her. That twisted, unnatural grin. Those black, empty eyes staring at me from the passenger seat. The words from the note kept repeating in my head. You should have stopped. Stopped for what? For who? My mind was screaming at me to leave the truck stop, to keep driving, to get as far away as possible. But where the hell was I supposed to go? This thing, whatever it was, had already found me. And I had a horrible feeling that no matter where I went, it would follow. A knock at my window nearly made me jump out of my skin. It was too soft, too slow. I turned my head, my heart hammering. A man stood outside the cab, tall, skinny, with a too-wide smile that didn't reach his eyes. His hands were covered in dirt. I rolled the window down an inch, just enough to hear him. Need something? My voice came out rough, unsteady. The man tilted his head, that unnerving smile never faltering. You took her, he said. I stared at him. What? You picked her up, he whispered, leaning in closer. That means she's yours now. A cold, heavy silence settled between us. Then, without another word, the man turned and walked away. I didn't waste any time. I fired up the engine and got the hell out of there. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to be moving. The highway stretched out in front of me, empty and dark, the glow of my headlights the only thing cutting through the night. I tried to convince myself it was over, that I had left whatever this was behind. But then, in my rearview mirror, the woman was in the back of the cab, watching me. I nearly lost control of the truck. I swerved onto the shoulder, my tires skidding against the asphalt. My whole body went numb with fear. I forced myself to look in the mirror again. The back of the cab was empty, but the air felt different, like something was still there, watching, waiting. A whisper slithered through the silence. You should have stopped. I pulled off at the next rest area. The place was deserted. Just an old vending machine, a couple of streetlights flickering against the cold night air. I climbed out of the cab, my hands shaking. I needed air. I needed to convince myself that I wasn't losing my mind. The second my boots hit the pavement, I felt it. I wasn't alone. I turned, scanning the empty lot. Nothing. Just my truck, sitting under the dim glow of the streetlights. Then, behind me, a whisper. You took her. I spun around, my heart in my throat. The man from before was standing at the edge of the parking lot. Too still, too silent, like he had been waiting for me to see him. Who are you? I shouted, my voice unsteady. The man took a slow step forward. You picked her up, he said again. She's yours now. I took a step back. What the hell are you talking about? His smile widened. You should have stopped. Then, without another word, he turned and walked into the woods. And just like that, he was gone. I barely made it back into my truck before I lost it. My breathing was ragged, my chest tight with fear. I had no idea what was happening, what any of this meant. But one thing was clear. I had picked something up on that road, and now it wouldn't leave me alone. I reached for my phone, ready to call someone, anyone. But when I turned the screen on, I saw it. A new text message from an unknown number. I hesitated before opening it, and when I did, my entire body went cold, because attached to the message was a photo of me, sitting in the truck, taken from the passenger seat. I didn't sleep for the next 2 days. I kept driving, only stopping for fuel, never staying in one place too long. I didn't get any more messages. Didn't see the woman again. For a moment, I thought maybe it was finally over. Then, at my next stop, I saw something in the back of my truck. At first, I thought it was a pile of old blankets, but when I got closer, I realized it was a dress. A dirty, blood-stained red dress, sitting neatly folded, with a note on top. For words, "You should have stopped. I don't drive that stretch of road anymore. I don't stop for broken-down cars. And I never drive at night if I can help it. Because I know now, she's still out there, still waiting. And the next trucker who stops, she'll go with them. And they'll never be the same again." I've been a trucker for over 20 years. In that time, I've seen plenty of weird things. Strange figures on the side of the road, shadows moving where there shouldn't be any, radios picking up whispers in the dead of night. Most of it, I've learned to ignore. But last winter, I saw something I can't explain, and I don't think I was supposed to. It was a brutal February night, and I was hauling a load through the backroads of Montana. A snowstorm had rolled in, and by the time I hit the mountains, visibility was almost zero. I should have pulled over. Any sane driver would have. But I was on a deadline, and stopping meant losing money. So I kept going, crawling through the winding roads at a cautious 20 miles per hour. For a long time, the world outside my windshield was nothing but white. Then, through the haze of snow, I saw headlights. A truck, parked on the side of the road. Hazards flashing. Someone standing beside it. A man. I slowed as I approached, my tires skidding slightly on the icy road. The man was waving. Not frantic, not desperate, just a slow, deliberate wave. I rolled my window down an inch, enough for my voice to carry. "You good?" The man stepped closer. That's when I noticed he wasn't wearing a coat, or gloves, or anything suitable for a snowstorm. Just a button-up shirt and slacks, the kind of outfit you'd wear to an office job. His hair was neatly combed back, not a single flake of snow sticking to it. He should have been shivering, but he wasn't. He was perfectly still, smiling. "Everything's fine," he said. His voice was calm, too calm. "Then why are you out here?" I asked. The man's smile widened. His teeth looked wrong. "Because I knew you'd stop." A sudden chill that had nothing to do with the cold washed over me. I glanced at his truck. It was old, decades old, rusted at the edges, with a logo I didn't recognize painted on the side. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The tires weren't covered in snow, like the truck hadn't been sitting there for hours, like it had been placed there, waiting. I turned back to the man. His smile wasn't fading. He took another step toward me. "Where are you heading?" he asked. I put my truck back into drive. "Nowhere near here." Then I hit the gas. The tires spun on the ice before finally catching traction. The man didn't move. Not when my headlights passed over him. Not when my trailer roared past his shoulder. He just stood there, watching me go, still smiling. I didn't stop again that night. Didn't check my mirrors. Didn't pull into a rest stop until I was miles away. And when I finally did, I locked the doors and sat there, gripping the wheel, trying to catch my breath. I didn't know what I had just seen, but something in my gut told me I had made the right choice. A few hours later, I got back on the road. The storm had finally started to clear, and the sun was creeping up over the horizon. For the first time all night, I let myself relax. Then my radio crackled. A voice cut through the static. Low, distorted. "You should have picked me up." I nearly ran off the road. I turned the CB dial, flipping through channels, trying to find the source. Nothing but static. I took a slow, shaky breath. I hadn't imagined that. Someone had spoken to me, and they sounded angry. The rest of the drive was quiet. I told myself I was being paranoid, that maybe my radio had picked up another driver's transmission by accident. By the time I reached the next truck stop, I had almost convinced myself I was overthinking things. Then I saw it. A truck parked near the edge of the lot. Rust creeping up the sides. The same faded, unrecognizable logo painted on the trailer. And standing beside it, the same man. I locked my doors. My heart was hammering. I knew it was him. But it couldn't be. I had left him miles back. There was no way he could have beaten me here. Yet, there he was, still wearing that same button-up, still not shivering, still smiling. I turned my truck back on and got the hell out of there. But as I pulled onto the highway, I made a mistake. I looked in the mirror, and the man, he was sitting in my back seat. I nearly crashed. By the time I turned my head, he was gone. But I could feel him. The air in the cab was different now, thicker, heavier, and I swear, in the faint hum of the radio static, I heard it again. A whisper. You should have picked me up. I drove through the night without stopping. I don't even remember pulling into the next station. But when I did, I was so exhausted I could barely think. The parking lot was empty. Just my rig and a few beat-up sedans belonging to the workers inside. I sat there for a long time, gripping the wheel. Then, finally, I turned my head. The passenger seat was empty. I let out a shaky breath. Maybe I was just overtired. Maybe the storm had gotten to me. Maybe I had just imagined. Knock, knock, knock. My stomach dropped. The sound had come from the passenger side door. A slow, deliberate knock. I turned my head and saw him, standing outside my truck, smiling. His teeth looked even sharper now. I threw the truck into gear, tires screeching against the pavement. But before I could peel out of the lot, I saw something that nearly made my heart stop. The passenger door handle, it was unlocking. The passenger door handle turned. Slow, deliberate. I slammed my hand against the lock button just in time. The mechanism clicked into place a second before the handle pulled all the way up. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, from the other side of the door, a soft, rhythmic tapping. Knock, knock, knock. I didn't turn my head. I didn't need to. I knew he was still there, watching me, smiling. I floored it. The tires screeched against the pavement as I tore out of the lot, my heart hammering against my ribs. I didn't look in the mirror. I didn't want to know if he was still standing there. Or worse, if he wasn't. I drove for hours. Didn't stop for gas. Didn't stop to eat. I just drove, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. By the time I finally pulled over at another truck stop, my body was running on fumes. I parked near the entrance, under a bright street light. I sat there for a long time, trying to convince myself that it was over, that maybe I had imagined all of it. Then my radio crackled, and a voice, low and distorted, whispered, "You're getting tired." My vision blurred with exhaustion. I turned the key, killing the engine. I just needed a few minutes, just enough to clear my head. I climbed into the sleeper, locked the dividing door, and pulled the curtain shut. The second I lay down, my body gave out. I didn't even realize I had fallen asleep, until I woke up to the sound of my truck door creaking open. My eyes snapped open. The sleeper was pitch black. For a moment, I thought I had imagined it. Then I heard it, the sound of slow footsteps, inside the cab, moving toward me. I reached for my knife, my fingers fumbling in the dark. My breath hitched as the footsteps stopped just outside the curtain. A beat of silence, then a whisper, "You're letting me in." I tore the curtain open, knife raised. Nothing. The cab was empty, but the passenger door was wide open. Cold air seeped in, sending a chill through my body. I forced myself to move, scrambling into the driver's seat and slamming the door shut. Then I saw it, on the dashboard, a Polaroid photo. I picked it up with shaking hands. It was a picture of me, sleeping in the sleeper berth, taken from the passenger seat. I nearly threw up. I dropped the photo like it had burned me and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life. I sped out of that lot so fast I barely checked for other cars. I just needed to go, to get as far away as possible. I kept checking the mirrors, half expecting to see him sitting in my back seat again. But there was nothing, no signs of anyone. I drove until the sun came up, until my eyes burned from exhaustion and I couldn't keep them open anymore. Then, finally, I pulled over at a truck stop on the edge of town. I parked, locked the doors, and tried to breathe. Maybe it was finally over. I didn't leave my truck, didn't go inside for food. I just sat there, staring out the windshield. At some point, my body gave in. I closed my eyes. I don't know how long I slept, but when I woke up, The passenger seat was no longer empty. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. He was sitting there, the man from the road, still wearing that neatly pressed shirt, still not shivering, still smiling. He leaned in close, his breath ice cold against my skin, and in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "You finally stopped." Everything went black. When I woke up, I was in a different parking lot. I had no memory of driving there, no memory of leaving the last stop. The only sign that anything had happened was a single red envelope sitting in my passenger seat. Inside was another Polaroid, a picture of the man, standing outside my truck, taken from inside the cab, and written on the back, "See you again soon." I don't drive that route anymore. I don't drive at night, and I never, ever stop for anyone, because now I know he's still waiting, and the next trucker who stops, he'll go with them instead. I've spent most of my life on the road. After 15 years of long-haul trucking, I thought I'd seen it all. Weird roadside figures, strange lights in the sky, people appearing where no one should be. But nothing compares to what happened to me last fall. Because that night, I picked up something that wasn't human. It was late October, and I was driving through Arizona on a route I had taken dozens of times before. The highway stretched for miles, nothing but desert on either side. No towns, no gas stations, no signs of life. I had been behind the wheel for over 8 hours, the yellow lines on the road blurring together in my tired vision. I knew I needed to stop soon, but the next rest area wasn't for another 50 miles. That's when I saw her. A woman standing on the side of the road. Alone. No car. No belongings. Just standing there. She was barefoot, wearing a thin white sundress that billowed in the desert wind. Her head was tilted slightly, like she was listening for something. And then, as my truck approached, she lifted her hand and gave a small, slow wave. Not frantic, not desperate, just waiting. I don't pick up hitchhikers. Not because I don't want to help, just because it's too risky. Truckers get all kinds of horror stories about people who stop for the wrong person and are never seen again. But something about her, I don't know how to explain it. She wasn't shivering, wasn't panicking, wasn't crying for help. She was just watching me, like she had been expecting me. I slowed down. I didn't mean to. My foot hesitated over the gas, and before I knew it, I had pulled onto the shoulder. She walked toward the passenger door before I could even think, like she already knew I was going to stop. I rolled down the window an inch. "You all right?" She smiled, and that's when I noticed her eyes. They were off. Too dark. Too empty. Like a doll's eyes. "I just need a ride," she said, her voice too soft for the howling desert wind. I hesitated. Then she reached for the door handle, and that's when every instinct in my body screamed, "Don't let her in." I slammed the lock button. She didn't react, didn't flinch, just kept smiling. Her fingers curled around the handle, slow and deliberate. I forced myself to speak. "Where's your car?" She tilted her head. "I don't have one." "Then how the hell did you get all the way out here?" Her smile widened, and then, in a voice that made my skin crawl, she whispered, "I've always been here." I hit the gas. The truck roared forward, tires spitting gravel as I peeled away from the shoulder. In the mirror, I saw her standing exactly where I left her, still smiling, still watching, still waiting. For the next hour, I tried to convince myself that I had imagined it, that exhaustion was making me see things, that she had been just some lost woman, nothing more. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had seen her before, that I knew her, and that somewhere deep down, she knew me too. I pulled into a truck stop around midnight. The place was mostly empty, just a few trucks parked in the lot, their cabins dark. I killed the engine and sat there for a long time, gripping the wheel, trying to slow my breathing. Then my radio crackled. A voice cut through the static. Soft. Familiar. "You shouldn't have left me." I turned off the radio. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Just sat there, staring at my reflection in the windshield. Then, slowly, I reached for my phone. I don't know why I checked my photos. I don't remember taking any. But when I opened my gallery, there was a new picture. My hands went cold. It was a photo of me. sitting in my truck, taken from the passenger seat. I barely remember getting out of the cab. I stumbled into the truck stop, my hands shaking, my breath coming too fast. The cashier, a young guy barely out of high school, looked up from his phone. "You okay, man?" I wiped the sweat from my forehead. "Yeah, just long drive." He nodded. "You heading east?" I frowned. "Yeah. How'd you know?" The kid shrugged. "That lady outside said so." My stomach dropped. I turned, heart pounding. There was a window near the entrance. Outside, under the flickering streetlight, she was standing there, smiling, waiting. I didn't move, didn't blink. She was exactly the same as before. Barefoot, white sundress, dark, empty eyes. But now, up close, I saw something else. Her feet weren't touching the ground, just slightly hovering, like she wasn't really there. The cashier laughed nervously. "You know her?" I shook my head, my throat too dry to speak. "Well, she asked if you'd give her a ride," he continued. I snapped my head toward him. "Did she say my name?" The kid blinked. Yeah. Said you were old friends." My stomach turned. I had never seen this woman in my life. So why did she know who I was? I backed away from the window, my hands trembling. "She's still out there?" I whispered. The cashier hesitated, turned his head toward the window. Then he frowned. "Dude." He looked back at me, his face pale. "There's no one there." I ran. Didn't check the window. Didn't look outside. I just ran to my truck, threw myself into the cab, and locked the doors. I sat there, shaking, and for the first time in years, I felt truly afraid. I reached for my phone. There was a new message, from an unknown number. I opened it with shaking hands, and my entire body went cold. It was another photo of me, standing inside the truck stop, taken from outside the window, with a message below it. "Let me in." I dropped the phone like it had burned me. The message was still there, glowing on the screen. "Let me in." I sat frozen in the driver's seat, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I didn't turn the truck on. I didn't look out the window, because I knew, if I looked, she'd be there, waiting, watching, smiling. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe minutes, maybe hours. At some point, the cashier knocked on my window. I nearly jumped out of my skin. "You okay, man?" he asked. I forced myself to roll the window down an inch. "You sure no one was outside earlier?" My voice came out raw, uneven. The kid looked at me, confused. "I mean, I saw a lady out there before, but she's gone now. Maybe she left?" I swallowed hard. Maybe, but I didn't believe that. Not for a second. I finally worked up the courage to leave. I started the engine, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The truck stoplights flickered behind me as I pulled onto the empty road. My whole body was on edge. Every mile that passed, I kept expecting to see her, standing on the shoulder, waving, waiting. But the road stretched out empty, just miles of desert and darkness. For the first time since I saw her, I started to think maybe it was over. Then my headlights flickered, the engine hiccuped, and then the passenger door unlocked. I slammed my hand on the lock button. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely think. I kept my eyes straight ahead, didn't look at the seat, didn't check the mirrors. But I felt it. The air inside the cab shifted, like I wasn't alone anymore, like something was sitting beside me. And then, a whisper, soft, loving. "I knew you'd come back for me." I nearly ran off the road. The truck jerked to the right, skidding onto the shoulder. I gripped the wheel, forcing it straight. I didn't stop, didn't slow down. I just drove, as fast as I could. And in the corner of my vision, I saw her, sitting beside me, smiling. "Who are you?" I choked out. She tilted her head, her dark, empty eyes watching me like I was something fascinating. "You already know me," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the roar of the engine. I clenched my jaw. "I don't," I said through gritted teeth. Her smile widened. "You did once." I pressed the gas pedal harder. The speedometer crept up, 80, 85, 90 miles per hour. She didn't react, didn't move, just sat there, hands folded in her lap, watching me, like she had all the time in the world. Then she said something that sent ice through my veins. "You don't remember, do you?" I kept my eyes on the road. Didn't answer. She leaned in closer. "You promised you'd never leave me." My hands clenched the wheel. My mind was spinning. What the hell was she talking about? I had never seen this woman in my life. But deep down, something in me twisted. A sick, crawling feeling. Like I had forgotten something important. Something I wasn't supposed to forget. I swallowed hard. "You have the wrong person," I muttered. She laughed. Soft. Sweet. And then, almost gently, "You left me on the road that night." The truck lurched. The wheel jerked in my hands, like something had taken hold of it. I fought against it, my muscles screaming in protest. My headlights flickered, and in that brief moment of darkness, I saw it. A flash of white fabric. A woman standing in the middle of the road. And before I could react, the truck slammed into her. The impact shook the whole cab. I slammed the brakes, tires screeching against the pavement. The truck skidded sideways before finally coming to a stop. My chest was heaving. I forced myself to look up. The road ahead was empty. No body. No sign of impact. Like I had never hit anything at all. But the passenger door was open, and she was gone. I sat there for what felt like an eternity. The desert stretched out around me, silent, watching. Then, slowly, I turned my head and saw a single red envelope sitting on the seat. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't want to touch it, didn't want to open it, but my hand moved on its own, like I was being forced. Inside was a Polaroid, a picture of a truck, my truck, and standing in front of it was her. The same sundress, the same empty eyes, the same too wide smile, and written at the bottom, "You should have stopped." It's been a year. I don't drive at night anymore. I don't pick up hitchhikers. But every October, I still see her, standing on the side of the road, waving, waiting, smiling. And no matter how fast I drive, she always catches up.